Hi, and welcome to Check Your Thread, a podcast about sewing more sustainably. My name's Zoe, and I'm obsessed with sewing. I've been blogging about it for over 13 years and am the creator and host of the popular handmade wardrobe challenge, Me Made May. But like many people, I've become increasingly concerned about the climate crisis and the way my lifestyle contributes to it. So in this podcast, I'll be nerding out about making clothes whilst exploring how to minimise the negative impact that it may have. I really hope you'll join me on this journey. Hello! Welcome to Check Your Thread. I hope you're doing well, and I hope you've had a good week since the last episode. I had a good week, in part because I got to attend the Future Fabrics Expo in London. It was super interesting and I learnt a lot. In fact, I've written up my experience and turned it into next week's episode for those who might be curious about the event and interested in fabric technology. Speaking of future episodes, I need your help. Check Your Thread's first birthday is fast approaching, if you can believe it. So, following the example of many great podcasts, I plan to mark the occasion by making an Ask Me Anything episode. I'm going to answer questions posed to me by listeners, so I need you all to send some in, please. You can ask me anything you fancy. It could be about sewing, sustainability, making the podcast, or something unconnected to any of these. I'm going to get someone else to read them out to me, so I won't see them in advance of recording. I think it's going to be really fun. So if you have a question for me, please email it to zoe@checkyourthread.com, and please write first birthday episode in the subject line so I don't open it and read your question by accident. I need the questions by the 15th of July, so thanks in advance for those. So how has your making been going? I haven't been doing hardly any making over the last week or so, and honestly, I think my mental health has suffered as a result. I've been doing some mending of my husband's jeans, but I was really missing getting stuck into a garment project. So the other night, even though I was really tired, I started a new project to make myself a summer weight dressing gown, or robe if you prefer. Literally every year when it starts to get warm, I wish I had a dressing gown made from something lightweight. So this year, I'm finally making one. I'm using the popular Leha robe pattern by Named Patterns, and I'm using some incredible printed cotton that is possibly vintage that I scored at the Ukraine Fabric Swap fundraiser that I organised back in March. Generally speaking, I don't recommend sewing when you're tired, but mentally I definitely feel much better for having got this project underway. Sustainability-wise, I just want to share a tip this week actually. So if you've got a smartphone, does it have a dark mode? So I have an iPhone, and I found in the settings that you can switch from light mode to dark mode. So basically, whenever you look at a web page, or you look at your emails, or some apps that would normally have a white background with black writing, when you select dark mode, it flips that, so you have a black background with white text. Now, the reason for that is it actually uses less energy. So presumably, you'll be charging your phone less often, and generally using less electricity. So check it out, dark mode. I thoroughly recommend it, and it feels a bit weird at first, but I swear you'll get used to it. This week, I get to thank 4 new patrons of the podcast for signing up to give monthly support. Many thanks to Violaine, Amy, Val, and Pat. I've also lost a couple of patrons this week, and I just want to say, if you've had to unsubscribe from support, I completely understand. I know that is a really tricky financial time for many people at the moment, so I just want to say thank you so much for the support that you have given us up to this point, and I wish you all the best, and I hope that you'll continue listening. But remember, more patrons makes this whole endeavour even more viable in the long term. So if you enjoy listening, please consider becoming a patron if you're able to do so. It takes less than a minute to sign up. The link is in the show notes and on the website checkyourthread.com. This week I actually signed up to support another person via Patreon myself. I'm now supporting the incredible writer Aja Barber, who I respect and appreciate so much. And let me tell you, if you're already signed up to Patreon and support someone, it takes less than 2 seconds to start supporting another. Speaking of people I respect and appreciate so much, today's episode features textile activist Shams Eldin Rogers. Yes, she is back. This is the second half of the first conversation that I recorded with Shams earlier this year. I know that the first episode with Shams, which was number 32, had a big impact on many listeners because I got so many messages from people letting me know that it did. It had an enormous impact on me also. If you haven't heard episode 32 yet, you might want to pause this one and go and listen to that one first, and then come back to this one. In today's episode, Shams gets into some more meaty topics related to feminism that everyone of whatever gender should be thinking about. We get into how period havers can have self-sufficiency and financial autonomy by making our own reusable period protection, which also has the benefit of reducing our environmental impact. And we move on to what happens in relationships when your art and craft resides in the domestic sphere and your arts are domestically useful. Shams also talks through how she approaches the thorny topic of cultural appropriation as it relates to clothing. Personally, I feel re-energised and re-politicised on a number of issues having listened back to this conversation, and I can't wait to hear what you lovely listeners make of this episode also. Okay, enjoy!
I would say I got to talk about the sanitary napkins.
Right.
When we were growing up, they gave you a little packet at school.
Yeah.
To introduce you to the company. I believe it was Playtex at that time,
right.
Or Kotex. And sanitary napkins are a big help for people. You don't always want to carry around your bloody pads in your wet bag. There may be occasions and times when you're going on a picnic or something. You don't want those. And you might want to have tampons to go swimming in or to do your sports. And fitness is very important. And you may not want to be literally on the rag. I'm not saying these things should be banned. I am saying these companies worked hard to convince us with these cute little kits made for the preteen girl. They worked hard to convince us that we should use those things all the time, that our entire menstrual periods, from the beginning of our menstruation, years to the end of menopause, should be involving giving money to them, buying things from them, and putting those things into the landfill.
Yeah.
I challenge that menstruation management. I challenge the idea that we should use these pads all the time or tampons all the time. I used to make the reusable pads for charity for Days for Girls, which is an international charity that supports menstruating people who can't go to school or access other things because they don't have pads. I also like to tell people, do you think about how many boxes? Usually people use a box a month of this stuff. And we bleed so much more today than people used to in the past. Because, and I've read this and looked this up and studied, we aren't pregnant as much. And we are and we are fatter. Even those of us who are thin are fatter than in the past. So we start earlier because we have the body fat that starts the menstruation earlier. Then many people are never pregnant or pregnant 2 times, 3 times. So you're not menstruating then. You maybe don't nurse. If you do nurse, again, it's only from 2 to 3 pregnancies. And then are not pregnant again, and they menstruate later in life as well. You know, it goes longer at the top end as well because of age and health. So we are menstruating much more frequently. The people that we're meeting from Afghanistan that are coming, these village people that are coming from Afghanistan who are 27 years old, many of them have had 7 pregnancies already.
Wow.
And nursing as well. So think how many fewer pads she would have used than I would have used at 27, who was never pregnant or nursing at any point. So if I'm frustrated, that's one of the areas that I'm most frustrated, is that we have been so thoroughly convinced that when we talk about reusable pads or people using the cups, the keepers, the menstrual keepers, I think they're made out of rubber. When we talk about this, people are horrified. What do you mean I have to touch my own blood? What do you mean I have to reach inside my own vagina? Look, that's your own vagina. We don't ask you to go on the street and find a stranger, put your hands on her vagina. It's your own vagina, your own body. All of it belongs to you. All of it is you. That's an area that I would say, if I were to chastise the listeners, I would say, listeners, stop right now. If you're a menstruator, whether you're a woman or a non-binary person or a trans man in the menstruating group, buy a couple more boxes over your lifetime for your sports or your travel or something like that. But could you please stop having boxes every month going into the landfill? This is just backwards. They tricked you.
Yeah. Yeah.
They tricked us to be disconnected with our own bodies.
Definitely. Even in the presentation of periods on the adverts, when they put the blue liquid, it's like, oh, God forbid it actually look like real blood,
Right. Because it's horrifying. It's
dirty.
other. It's dirty.
Yeah.
It's other. And I mean, because I'm talking about sewing, that's why I'm emphasizing the reusable menstrual pads. But I'm also,
or the period pants as
or
well.
the period pants, yeah. And those are very recent.
Yeah, really recent. I've literally just made my first ones, and I'm 42, and I've had a lot of periods. It's like, right. I really wish I'd found these before.
And they didn't have them. And I remember commenting on your post when you said you were making those. They are a new innovation. I'm in favor of it, providing that there's breathing and it's not causing infections. Mm-hmm. I don't like polyester and vinyl and whatnot all up in your crotch. Mm-hmm. But if it's not causing harm, I like that too. What I don't like is plastic from the pads going into the landfills.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the disconnection that represents. A side note to that, I don't like the artificial formula that in my country is often given free to the new mothers at the hospital and receives government support through programs for the new mothers. I don't mean there's no place for it. There are people for whom it's necessary. What I object to is the wholesale belief that our bodies shouldn't provide milk to our children, but that they should drink these artificial formulas. And then our children should be diapered in plastic and paper from companies. I don't know how long it went in England, but in my childhood, there was a service that would come and pick up the cloth diapers. My mother would hold the diaper in the toilet and swirl away the poop. Yeah. And then throw the diaper into the bucket provided by the company. Yeah. And then they come every so often and take the diapers away and bring them back.
Yeah, they have those services now, but they're very expensive and they're really they exclude basically anyone that hasn't got a pretty high income.
Whereas in your childhood, did they have those services for the regular people?
I don't know. I know that when I was a baby, I had cloth nappies. Mm-hmm. I'm an only child, so I think my mum dealt with it herself. Mm-hmm. I don't think she used a service. It's interesting. Mm-hmm. When my children were babies, I bought disposable nappies, but I chose, for whether or not it was worth it, I chose to buy the ones that were completely paper and biodegradable, because I thought it was slightly better. But when my children were babies, I didn't have any outside space, so I couldn't line dry. Mm-hmm. So that was like my compromise,
But I'm not denying that these things could be needed for some people in some circumstances. What I'm upset about is the idea that they are needed by everyone in every circumstance. That there's a cultural belief. There are apparently people stealing diapers in the United States. They are having to lock up the diapers in certain areas because the people don't have enough money to buy the diapers. It's not just bad behavior on their part, because stealing is bad, but they don't have access to the sewing machines, to the fabric, to the knowledge. I helped a friend when she knew she was going to have a baby. She said, I'm going to call Shantz and have her teach me how to make diapers. Do I know how to make diapers? No. But she knew I knew how to make the menstrual pads, and she knew I could figure out the instructions, so we made some diapers. Brilliant. They may not have an older person or a person of whatever age who has the time available, who has the resources to teach them. Yeah. These reusable diapers cost real money at the store. But since the government is providing subsidies for some of this, could it provide people with some reusable diapers? Yeah. You wouldn't it would be cheaper. Yeah. Oh, but then the special interest businesses wouldn't make the same amount of money. So, thinking about my frustrations as a sewist, I think if you're going to have a body, we should be able to do most of what our body needs in terms of our sewing for ourselves.
Yes.
Our clothes, our pads. I took a shoemaking class. My shoemaking is so horrible. It's so horrible. I've decided to leave that to a specialist. I recently found 2 places in Toronto that can build shoes for you.
Amazing.
So I had a pair that I already had remade.
Yeah.
It cost $219 for the rebuild.
Wow.
And he says, when you want one that's scratch and not a rebuild, it's going to be $500. And everybody got $500. I'm not denying. But if I buy these shoes for $79, $80, they're enslaving my sister in China to make those shoes. When thought about that way, wouldn't we all want to try to say, oh, maybe I don't need very many pairs?
Yes.
And maybe I need to keep updating them. I buy the 500 pair one year and then I update it every couple of years for $200 rather than enslave people. It's a big investment to start out. Like, it's a big investment in the reusable diapers, the period pads. It took you hours to make them.
Yeah.
But you ain't got to make them every month.
Yes, that's it. Now, I've got 3 pairs of period pants, and that's going to save me so many tampons.
Right. And you might need them 10 more years. You might have another occasion to make a few more. I don't know how well they're going to hold up, but you might menstruate 10 more years, maybe 15 at the end. You can use these for a while.
Yeah, I'm already thinking, like, my daughter's 8, in a 5, I don't know how many years' time when she starts her period, I'm like, okay, right, I'm ready for this. We're going to make some period pants.
I did that for my sister's child. My nibbling, who is non-binary, is among the menstruating group. And so when they were first about to get their period, I went out, I bought attractive fabric, matching sets. I made lovely sets for them to
How did they embrace them?
At first they were saying, oh no, and they wouldn't use them. They said they were thicker than the supermarket ones, which are now ultra thin with their technology. But my sister really made a great example and went and found Mom's Sewing Machine and made pads for herself.
Right.
Which previous to that, she had not been using reusable pads, made them for herself and would tell her child, I'm using the reusable pads, and would say things like, okay, I'm washing them now. And then, child's like, I don't want to see you washing them. And, she said, you don't have to see them, but I'm just letting you know I've got them in the washer. I'm going to hang them outside now. And so my sister did a great example. And then a couple of years later, from what I understand, I don't live with them, but from what I understand, my nibbling didn't have pads. And my sister said, maybe we could get those ones that your auntie made. And so from what I understand, they've been using them since. And my sister has made more to fill out the set. Now, they're shy. And, as with many teenagers, they're very shy about their body and so forth. But from my understanding, they're using. It took a while to sink in. When we made them at school for the Days for Girls, for the children that we were going to send abroad, and I had the students making them in Vermont, a couple times when we have some that didn't pass the security check or the quality check, we gave those to some of our students who were involved in the menstruating project, in the menstruation health project. And those students came back, and some of them reported, I would use them and I will use them at night. And so made some of their own to make, because we only gave one of the damaged ones to each of the students that we were discussing. They said, I would use it at night. I would use it at home. A couple of them said, I think I look forward to using them when I'm not a teenager. I feel funny about my boyfriend feeling them.
Interesting.
I thought it was interesting that they were able to be so articulate with a teacher, to say that to the adult. In our time, I don't think I would have felt as comfortable about that. But also, what does it mean when you feel able to be sexually active, or at least touching with the boy, to the fact that he's touching your pad, that's, but you don't feel comfortable for them to know that you have a reusable pad? Like, what's going on with the youth and their bodies, and how we're, I'm not a health teacher. I don't usually engage in those conversations unless students come to me after school or something and are asking about that. And certainly my third graders that I have now, few of them will ever have such a conversation with me. But I wonder how people are dealing with their sewing relating to their periods and their partners, if their partners don't also menstruate, or maybe even if their partners do menstruate. Like, how is all this playing out? How, in your house, how is that working for you with the period pants? And you have a husband, you mentioned.
Yeah. They're on the washing line. They're in the laundry basket. They're sometimes soaking in the bath, to be honest, after I use them. It's part of life. Yeah, right. It's part of how I deal with that part of my month, you know? So I hope that I am normalizing it for my daughter, that she'll see it as an option. I don't see that she wouldn't at this point, you know?
You have more than one child, right?
Yeah, I have a little boy as well.
So maybe he also it's normalized for him too, you know?
Very much. Yeah. I'm very aware of that.
Also at our house, it's not anything special.
Yeah.
You know, it's nothing. My husband, who is blind, as I mentioned, my husband commented that he was used to, when he was with women in previous years, there would be a very large, somewhat squishy package in terms of the pad in the package. And he said after a while, the packages weren't so big.
Right.
And he says, and you're saying there is no package. Like, there's nothing I have to buy. There's nothing I have to avoid in the cabinet. And it's just some fabric in the wash.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean anything to him. He just commented, it just takes up less space and it's less.
Yeah. That's so interesting. Yeah, that he's thinking in the purely like the physical situation. There's not that kind of internal hand wringing that we're having as period havers about what it means, how we'll be perceived. And yeah, he's seeing it purely as in like, oh, there's less physical space in the cabinet being used now. That's really interesting.
It's also interesting what he thinks about sewing.
Yeah.
So the sewing room, or my atelier, is understood. We've explained, and he's obviously a grown-up man. He's not a kid. It's a dangerous place for him. Right. He should not put his hands on surfaces. There could be needles. There could be scissors. If I had a rotary cutter, I would keep it closed. But the scissors, you know, they're on this. They're on these counters. So he understands that he's not to go around putting his hands on the sewing room. He says that in his life, he's perceived sewing, and he grew up, his mother was a sewist and a master quilter. He's perceived sewing as a very start and stop activity. He would hear the machine humming or whirring, and then he would hear these varying periods of silence.
Yeah. And
then the machine again. So he understands sewing as these periods of noise and silence, which are irregular in length, that then result in things that come out of there. Obviously, again, he's a grown-up, he understands the process, but things that come out of that very frequently for him. Yeah. So she made stuffed animals for him and his brother. He still has his set, and his brother has given his set to his kids. So he has the stuffed animals. He had received clothes. He received quilts. And now he's married to a sewist, and he receives quilts, and he receives pajamas and clothes and undies now. You know, so sewing is sounds and stuff for him. Yeah, that's how it has come into his world.
That's so interesting. I remember when I first met my husband, we were both living in Spain, and we moved together quite quickly, and we were in this tiny little flat together. And so my sewing stuff took up a large section of the lounge, and he was really surprised that it wasn't all sitting in front of a machine. That was just a tiny part of it.
I think my husband doesn't. I'm pretty sure he doesn't know what's going on with the patterns and the high table. I'm sure he doesn't, have any perception of that because it doesn't make any sound. Yeah. But it was important to me to have a relationship with a man who, in my case, it's men only, a man who respected my creativity and was willing to live with the proceeds of my creativity. I was married very, very briefly to a man. I made him a traditional fana sweater from Norway with the Norwegian wool. I mean, it was perfect. It's absolutely perfect. And I gave him the sweater, and he went around saying, "Oh, look, I'm a fad. Ha, ha, I'm a queer. Ha, ha, I'm a punk. I'm like, what?" his sister and brother-in-law were there,
That's
and
heartbreaking.
they were offended, but for the wrong reason also. They said, man, she spent time on that. You could sell that sweater for probably 25, $50. You're making fun of your wife's. I'm like, the yarn was $90. I mean, I'm divorced from that dude.
I was going to say that. I'm so glad that was a brief thing.
It isn't just that, but I mean, that's just emblematic on what kind of dude he was. So I knew when I was looking later than that for a new relationship, I wanted a person who respected my creativity and my making.
Yeah.
And my husband had a very nice first wife. We're friends with her today. I've knitted with her together. Between her and his mother and her family, he was well trained in receiving handmade goods in his life. So he's been very respectful of that. We weren't young, so we weren't in a little apartment in Spain. I already had maintained a studio for myself in my own home for quite a few years at that point. I don't know, maybe I'd had my own studio for 15 years or more in my house. When I say studio, I mean it belongs to me. I make things in it. I can leave things in it. So I wouldn't have taken up with him if he hadn't made space for me to physically have a studio. Why should I live with some dude and not have access to my art?
Yeah.
And he's an artist himself, as I mentioned. He obviously was far on board with that. Sure, you want a studio? Great, you have a studio. And you know, I've lived with a studio. That's my life, and I have a right to continue it. For people who don't have the space, we get it. But a room of one's own, I believe, is important for whatever art that the woman artist wants to make. Yeah. And I'm glad to live with a person who respects and appreciates. I'm glad that you're living with a person as well.
Yeah, I'm very grateful that he doesn't complain that most of our dining area is also my sewing area. But it was interesting when you say the fact that I create and I had this creative passion and that it was a physical thing that I was able to use as a way to kind of express a lot of my kind of ethos and the ideas that I was having surrounding sustainability and stuff was one of the things that I think that my husband said that he really was particularly drawn to me about, because he's a very creative, very intelligent person, but he very much lives very cerebrally. He doesn't really live in the physical plane a lot of the time. And he's read all the Marx. He's very, very into a lot of those concepts. But there was a real disconnect for him between how he's thinking, how he's feeling, but how he's living his life. At that point, anyway, he really struggled to kind of merge those two. And then I turn up. No, I haven't read Marx, but I feel this and I feel this and I feel this and I'm trying this and I'm making this because of this and this is how I write about it. This is what I do and I'm blogging about it and I'm talking about it and I've created this challenge. It's called Me Made May and la la la. And I think that he really, although we're very different, I'm kind of much more practical and he's kind of much more cerebral, but I think that we both, we could see that there was those links and
And I think as a Muslim woman, I also would like to say that it is sometimes difficult to find a person who's going to live with your creativity in these domestic spheres, but who also isn't expecting that as your due. So I'm married to a non-Muslim. It was difficult to decide over the years how I was going to live together with my religion and another person. But it was also important for me to have because sewing is an art and knitting is an art. They also are domestically useful.
Yes.
But they are, for me, arts and political actions. I didn't want to feel that I was doing those just to keep the household together.
Yeah.
There were some men that I met earlier in my life, nice, again, respectable men, but for whom these arts were part of what women do.
Right. And how does that tie up with your religion?
Many times in Islam, we have people who fail to remember that the Prophet Muhammad told us that the woman doesn't owe homemaking to her husband. People who forgot or never knew that this is not part of what God has ordained for us as our duties, that it is something that we choose to do, but that the husband could also do to make the home, to make the house work. And it is hard to find that support as a Muslim woman, I feel, to be able to understand my art and creativity, which are in the spheres that are traditionally considered for women. They are a gift.
They're not your duty.
They're not my duty. So all of the things that I'm doing, and I feel respected in my home. If I'm cooking food from scratch, or like this morning, I ordered food from the bakery, and had bread and croissant delivered. If I'm washing the clothes or hanging out the clothes or cleaning the house, again, cleaning the house, not my strong suit. All those things, though, are choices that I'm making, and they are not to be taken for granted. And so again, when I'm repairing something for my husband of some item of clothing that has gone iffy, I made him pajamas when we first got together. So it's been 7 years since he's got these pajamas. He wears pajamas all the time. And then he also has some summer pajamas that I made. So the elastic went bad. He politely said, "Honey, do you think you have time to put some new elastic in the pajamas?" Like, of course! Great! Where's the pajamas? Let's go! And, it's just a quick second because I put those together. I made them, so I know how to put elastic back into it. And it's not even as big as a mend. I don't even report it because I have some other mends of mending holes. And also, of course, I buy the elastic by the roll. So I've got plenty of elastic. I don't have to go out and make a trip to the fabric store. But then there was a true thank you.
Good.
A true thank you, honey. And put the pajamas back on. Okay, great. I feel respected in that, and I feel fortunate in living in a life where I have that respect. And I feel fortunate in having held out to live with a person that I do have respect for, and respect for my art. So that's something I feel important. And I wanted to say specifically as a Muslim woman, because I know that that's a struggle that a lot of Muslim women have, especially if your art is in the domestic sphere. It's often not even described as art.
Sure.
That's not everybody, but it's a lot.
Oh my goodness. You're just going to make me cry again.
Okay, well, I'm finding this conversation is really interesting. I wouldn't have felt as free to be as open if I hadn't seen you being an activist already, although you did not know that I was seeing you in this way. But I would not have felt as open also if I hadn't heard when you're asking the other people on their panels, you're asking them, how do they feel about what they're doing? That it's very much about humans sewing. And I feel like from my understanding, this is what I'm taking with me, you started this podcast to help people learn about making the earth better with their sewing. We love sewing. I know, at least I love the washing the fabric. I love washing. I even will watch it sometimes as it spins around. I love hanging it outside, the cutting it. I like the machine least of all of it. But you have to use the machine to make your dream of fabric come true. But it is not the machine part that I really love. I'm making my husband hanbok and durmagi. The hanbok is a traditional garment of Koreans.
Right.
It has a shirt, then it has a jacket or vest, and it has the trousers. So the trousers are called the baji. I haven't found any commercial patterns available for the men's jacket or the men's shirt. There are books available that detail the proportions you need to use. And it could be that these things are available in Korea. From Folkwear, I found a hanbok pattern years ago, before I ever even met this guy who was half Korean. Before ever going to Korea, I bought this hanbok pattern and made myself a hanbok outfit, the women's outfit with the chaegari jacket and the chima, which is the skirt. So my husband recently has said that he's willing to wear a Korean overcoat when he's going out to give performances, or when he's going places that he needs his suit, like we're going to the opera or somebody's wedding. He would like to wear a Korean overcoat style rather than a Western overcoat style.
Yeah.
But there aren't any patterns available for a durmagi. So I began to research what that would look like. In the process, I decided to make the regular jacket, the chaegari, but the men's chaegari, because I didn't want to mess up all that interfacing and all that silk and all that wool to make the durumagi, which has a different shape. So I did this research, and I also found out they wear a certain kind of pants called baji. There's no pattern available that I know about for the baji, but there's a book you can order. At first, I ordered one book from Korea on how to make this. I found out that I had not understood, and I ordered a book on how to make them for like Barbies, Korean Barbies.
Oh no!
I paid, I think, $83 between the shipping and the book. But undaunted, I started again. I found the right book to order. And so the book is coming, and I can make the garments. I can use the Google Translate to tell you what to do, you know. So that is really on the indie frontier of making things.
Yes, that's exciting.
And when we think about cultural appropriation, when we're sewing and we're moving out into doing something and trying something that could be of another culture, I think it's important to have a good amount of research on who that's used for in that community, if there's any kind of social restriction on it, what kinds of uses can it be, and also the power dynamic between those giving and those taking the elements of culture. So the hanbok really means clothes of the Korean people.
Right.
There were laws at various times from the government into who could wear certain outfits and who had to wear certain outfits. But in today's world, any person, Korean or otherwise, can go into the store and buy hanbok or order hanbok. And in fact, the government offers places for you to try it on and get photographed in it, and then you get free admission to palaces and museums if you're wearing hanbok, whether you're Korean or not Korean. So they would like people to learn more about their hanbok culture, and they certainly welcome anybody to use it. There's no king anymore. There's no rulers, so there were clothes that were reserved for rulers over time. You usually don't see people wearing them on the street, but if they wanted to, they could. There's no longer any sumptuary laws. So when I came to first making my own hanbok, I was able to see, oh, this is so common that they're selling a pattern for it in North America. But when I decided to make them for my husband, I wanted to say that, okay, I'm not Korean, I'm American. Am I exploiting anybody or crossing any lines? And after my research, I determined not only was I not doing it, it will be welcomed and appreciated. Probably when he starts going to these events, people of Korean background who see this half Korean gentleman doing it, they will probably be happy that he's doing it and not upset. But I do think it's important when you're adopting and adapting clothing from cultures to find out what it looks like and what they use it for.
Oh, my goodness. This has just been the most amazing conversation. And I feel like I could ask you 50 bajillion questions more, but you've been so generous.
Maybe next year when you're, getting more episodes, I'm looking forward that you're getting so many different voices and different people. And maybe next year or something when you say, you know what, it's time for another visit with Shams.
I would love that.
Feel very welcome. And I think it's great not to jam it up full with the same people. I also am looking forward to when you can travel again, like now nobody can go anywhere. And when you can go to some places, you can actually interview the people. So anyway, thank you so much. This has been really fun, and I'm looking forward to listening.
Thank you. Bye. Thanks so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this episode and are left feeling inspired. For more info about the podcast, including show notes for this and every episode, head to checkyourthread.com. I'd love to hear from you, so if you have any comments, questions, or ideas for future episodes, please get in touch by emailing zoe@checkyourthread.com or find me on Instagram @checkyourthread. Massive thanks to Patrick Potter for production support, to Sylvia Seller for the awesome logo design, and to Simon at Palm Skin Productions for the music. This ad-free podcast would not be possible without listener support, so if you feel you are able, please consider signing up to the Check Your Thread Patreon. For the equivalent of buying me a coffee each month, you'll be making it possible to continue producing regular episodes. Links can be found in the show notes and on the website checkyourthread.com. I hope you'll listen again next week. Until then, take care. Bye!